The billionaire could see perfectly, but he still put on dark glasses, grabbed a white cane, and told his fiancée he was blind. Not to test her love for him, but to see how she'd treat his sons when she thought their father was powerless. And the answer nearly destroyed him. Grayson Whitlock wasn't cruel. He was desperate. And desperation, born from watching your children suffer repeatedly, makes you do things you never thought you were capable of. Let me take you back. 3 years before the white cane, before the dark glasses, before Amara Bellwood ever stepped foot in the Whitlock mansion, there was Alara. Alara Whitlock died the same day she gave Grayson the greatest gifts of his life. Twin sons, Caleb and Rowan. This part breaks my heart, because she fought so hard. The doctors said there were complications, that sometimes the body has to choose. And in those final moments, surrounded by prayer and beeping machines and Grayson's desperate pleas to God, Alara whispered one request: "Promise me you'll teach them to see people's hearts." Then she closed her eyes and never opened them again. What would you do if the person you loved most in the world made you promise something with their final breath? What if you had no idea how to keep that promise? Grayson held his newborn sons that night while his wife grew cold in the next room. Money couldn't reverse it. Power couldn't rewind it. Faith felt like a broken contract. He had prayed harder than he'd ever prayed in his life, and God had still taken her. The mansion he brought those boys home to was 17,000 square feet of marble floors, vaulted ceilings, art collections, and silence. So much silence. The kind that swallows baby cries and makes everything feel hollow. Wealth filled every corner, but warmth never stayed. Over the next 3 years, Grayson hired 14 different nannies and caretakers. 14. Some were careless, leaving the boys crying in cribs while they scrolled through phones or chatted with friends. Some were cruel, speaking harshly, handling the twins roughly, treating them like obligations instead of children. Others were simply indifferent, going through the motions like the boys were tasks on a checklist. Feed them, change them, put them to bed, collect the paycheck, repeat. And every single time one of them left, fired, quit, or just disappeared, Caleb and Rowan cried harder, withdrew deeper, and learned a lesson no child should ever learn that young. People don't stay. What broke me wasn't the crying. It was when they stopped crying. When Rowan, barely 3 years old, stopped reaching for people. When Caleb started flinching if someone approached too quickly. When they both learned to play quietly, separately, like making noise might drive another person away. Grayson watched it happen. He watched his sons build walls around hearts that were supposed to be wide open. And it destroyed something in him because he knew, deep in the place where grief and guilt mix, that he was part of the problem. He was present physically, provided everything materially. But emotionally, he was a ghost in his own home, haunted by Alara's absence, crippled by the fear that if he loved too deeply again, loss would come for him a second time. So he buried himself in work, in meetings and mergers and building empires that felt easier to control than his own heart. The twins had everything money could buy, and nothing money couldn't. This is where faith starts getting complicated, because Grayson still prayed, still went to church on Sundays when guilt outweighed exhaustion, still read the boys' bedtime Bible stories, even though he wasn't sure he believed them anymore. He was angry at God, but he couldn't fully let God go. Maybe that's what grief does. It makes you wrestle with heaven while standing in hell. Then, 14 months ago, Grayson met Amara Bellwood at a charity gala he almost didn't attend. She wasn't like the others, wasn't dripping in diamonds or name-dropping connections or angling for access. She wore a simple navy dress, spoke softly, and spent most of the evening volunteering at the guest registration table instead of networking with donors. When Grayson introduced himself, she smiled politely and said, "I know who you are. Your foundation does beautiful work." That was it. No flattery, no agenda hanging in the air, just genuine acknowledgement, and then back to her task. What shocked me was that he almost walked away, almost let the moment pass. But something stopped him. Maybe Alara's voice in his memory, maybe the quiet nudge of the Holy Spirit he'd been ignoring for years, and he asked her to coffee. Over the next few months, they built something careful, something slow. Amara never asked about his wealth, never pressed about the loneliness she could clearly see in his eyes. She listened more than she spoke, prayed before every meal, even in public, quoted scripture not to preach, but to comfort. And when she finally met Caleb and Rowan, she did something no caretaker had ever done. She knelt down to their level, looked them in the eyes, and said softly, "Hi, I'm Amara. I'm so happy to meet you. Do you like books? I brought one we could read together if you want." Rowan hid behind Grayson's leg. Caleb stared at the floor, but Amara didn't force it. She simply sat down cross-legged on the floor, opened the book, and started reading aloud to herself, as if it didn't matter whether anyone joined her. Within 5 minutes, Rowan sat beside her. Within 10, Caleb leaned against her shoulder. Grayson watched from the doorway and felt something crack open inside his chest. Hope, maybe. Or terror. Possibly both. Because here's the thing about people who've been hurt. We don't trust easily. We test. We watch. We wait for the moment the mask slips, because we know masks always slip eventually. Grayson started noticing small things. The way Amara's phone never rang during their time together. The way she chose the boys over social appearances, canceling brunch plans to help Caleb build a block tower. The way she spoke life into them. "God made you so special. You're so brave. I'm so proud of you." Without it sounding forced or religious in a performative way. She was either the real thing or the best actress he'd ever met. And Grayson, haunted by 14 failed caretakers and 2 boys who couldn't afford another abandonment, needed to know which. The idea came to him late one night, 3 weeks after Amara had stayed for dinner and helped put the twins to bed. He'd overheard part of a phone conversation she'd had in the hallway, something about a friend asking if she knew what she was getting into with Grayson. Amara's response was quiet. "I'm not getting into anything. I'm getting to know him and his sons." It was innocent, probably protective even, but grief and fear have a way of twisting neutral words into worst-case scenarios. What if she was just performing? What if the moment things got hard, she'd leave like all the others? Grayson couldn't survive watching his sons break again. And honestly, he couldn't survive breaking again himself. So he made a decision that shocked even him. He would test her, not with questions or confrontation, but by removing the one thing his wealth and status provided, power. He would pretend to be blind. "I know what you're thinking. I wrestled with it too. This feels manipulative, feels wrong, and maybe it is. But here's the question that haunted Grayson, the question that kept him awake at night staring at the ceiling. If she loves me when I'm powerful, does she love me or what I provide? And more importantly, will she love my sons when she thinks I can't protect them?" Grayson spent 2 weeks planning it. He consulted a doctor he trusted, who reluctantly agreed to falsify records for a rare degenerative condition that supposedly caused sudden vision loss. He practiced navigating the mansion with his eyes closed. He ordered custom dark glasses and a professional-grade white cane. He told no one, not his assistant, not his lawyer, not even the housekeeping staff. This wasn't about public theater. This was about private truth. The night before he planned to tell Amara, Grayson stood in the twins' bedroom and watched them sleep. Caleb's arm was thrown over Rowan's chest. They looked so small, so fragile, so desperately in need of someone who would stay. He whispered a prayer he wasn't sure God would honor. If she's real, show me. If she's not, protect them. I can't do this alone anymore. Then he walked into his own room, placed the dark glasses on his nightstand, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, Amara would meet a version of Grayson Whitlock with nothing to offer but need. A blind billionaire, a helpless father, a man stripped of the power that usually kept people interested. And whatever happened next would reveal the one thing money can never buy, the truth. Before we go any further, take a second to support this story. Subscribe now to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who loves emotional stories like this. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to see how far this story has traveled. What Grayson didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that pretending to lose his sight would end up teaching him how to finally see. He called Amara the next morning, kept his voice steady, controlled. "Can you come over? Something's happened." She arrived within the hour. Grayson was waiting in the living room, dark glasses already in place, white cane resting against his chair. The morning light filtered through the curtains, and for a moment, just a brief, guilty moment, he almost called the whole thing off. Then he heard Caleb crying upstairs, heard the nanny's impatient footsteps, heard Rowan's small voice saying, sorry, for something that probably wasn't his fault. He gripped the cane tighter. When Amara walked in, he didn't turn toward her voice the way he normally would. He kept his gaze fixed somewhere past her shoulder, tracking her movements only by sound. "Grayson?" Her voice carried concern, not alarm. "What's wrong?" He took a breath. Here's where the lie became real. "I woke up yesterday and couldn't see. The doctors ran tests. It's a condition called..." He rattled off the medical term his hired doctor had provided. Rare, degenerative, happened faster than anyone expected. Silence stretched between them. This was the moment. The moment she'd either reveal calculation or compassion. The moment she'd ask about his business, his assets, whether this changed things between them. Amara walked closer. He heard her knees hit the floor in front of his chair, felt her hands gently cover his. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "That must be terrifying." No questions about money. No panic about what this meant for their relationship. No concern about how his blindness might affect her future. That caught my attention, because in my experience, people's first questions reveal their first priorities. "The boys," she said quietly. "Do they know?" Grayson's throat tightened. Of all the responses he'd anticipated, that wasn't one of them. "Not yet. I don't know how to tell them." "We'll figure it out together," Amara said. Not, "I'll help you figure it out." We. Like she'd already decided she wasn't going anywhere. What would you do if someone committed to your hardest moment before you even asked them to? The next few days turned Grayson's world sideways. Without sight, or pretending without it, everything sharpened. He'd spent years seeing but not noticing. Now he had no choice but to notice everything. Footsteps told him mood. Amara's were always gentle, deliberate, like she was thinking about where she was going. The nannies were rushed, distracted. The twins were hesitant, testing whether it was safe to move through space. Tone revealed truth. People said one thing but meant another, and voices carried the difference. Amara's voice stayed steady, warm, never condescending, never performative. She spoke to him the same way she'd spoken to him before, just with more patience. Silence became a language. The twins were quiet around the nanny, loud and chaotic around Amara. The house itself seemed to respond differently depending on who was present. This part messed with me, because I realized how much I'd been missing by relying on appearances. How much we all miss. There's a verse in Proverbs that kept circling Grayson's mind during those days. The eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch on the wicked and the good. Maybe God was showing him what it meant to see the way heaven sees, not with eyes, but with attention. Amara moved into a guest room on the second floor. Not because Grayson asked, but because she offered. "You need help right now," she said simply. "Let me help." The nanny protested, said it wasn't necessary, that she was perfectly capable of managing the household. But Grayson, feeling his way through the new power dynamics, quietly told the nanny she could take a few weeks of paid leave. He needed to hear how Amara treated his sons when no one else was watching. No audience, no performance, just truth. And what he heard changed everything. Mornings started with soft voices. Amara would wake the twins gently, singing quiet worship songs while helping them dress. Not children's church songs, but real hymns. "Great is thy faithfulness," "It is well," songs that carried weight and history. Caleb asked once, "Why do you sing to God?" "Because he listens," Amara said. "And sometimes when I don't know what to say, singing helps." She never forced it, never made them repeat prayers they didn't understand. But she modeled something Grayson had forgotten how to model: faith as a conversation, not a performance. She spoke gently to them, always. Knelt down to their eye level even when she was tired. Grayson could hear her knees hit the floor a dozen times a day, buckling shoes, wiping faces, picking up toys. "Rowan, can you help me with something?" she'd ask, making tasks feel like invitations instead of commands. "Caleb, I love how you stack those blocks. You're so creative." She prayed with them before meals, before bed, and randomly throughout the day. Not long, formal prayers, but honest ones. "God, thank you for this food. Thank you for these boys. Help us have a good day." The twins didn't respond immediately. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, but slowly, like ice thawing, they started responding to her, started speaking more, started laughing, actually laughing. One afternoon, Grayson heard a crash from the kitchen, then silence, then Rowan's small, terrified voice. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Grayson's chest tightened. He knew what was coming. Every nanny before Amara had reacted with frustration, annoyance, lectures about being more careful. But Amara's voice was calm. "Hey, it's okay. Accidents happen. Are you hurt?" "No." Rowan's voice was small. "Good. That's what matters most. Let's clean this up together." Grayson heard the sound of broken glass being swept, heard Amara talking to Rowan about being careful of sharp edges, heard her say, "You know what? I broke a whole plate last week." Sometimes our hands just slip. God gives us grace for that. No anger, no impatience, no making a child feel like a burden for being a child. This was supposed to reveal her. Instead, it was exposing me. Because I realized, sitting there in my fake blindness, that I'd been so focused on testing Amara's character that I hadn't examined my own. I'd been emotionally absent from my sons, assuming money and staff were enough. I'd been bitter toward God instead of leaning into faith. I'd been protecting myself instead of being present. Pretending to be blind was showing me how blind I'd actually been. The moments piled up like evidence. Amara turned down a society event she'd been excited about because Caleb had a fever, and she didn't want to leave him. "There will be other parties," she told a friend on the phone. "These boys need consistency right now." She never complained about messes, never sighed with frustration when they interrupted her, never spoke about them like they were obligations. Instead, she spoke life into them constantly. "God made you so special, Caleb. Rowan, you're so kind. I see how hard you're trying. and I'm so proud of you." One evening, Grayson overheard her sitting with them in their room. The twins were supposed to be sleeping, but Rowan was scared of the dark. "Miss Amara," Rowan whispered, "what if bad things happen when we can't see?" There was a pause. Then Amara's gentle voice, "You know what? Even when it's dark and we can't see, God sees us. He never stops watching over you. The Bible says he doesn't even sleep because he's always making sure we're okay. Isn't that amazing?" "Really?" Caleb asked. "Really. And you know what else? Even when people can't see, God gives them other ways to know they're loved, like hugs and kind words and people who show up." Grayson sat outside the door, dark glasses in his lap where no one could see him, and felt tears slip down his face. Faith is action, not words. Love shown, not spoken. Character revealed through 1,000 small, ordinary moments when no one important was watching. Except someone was watching. He was. And God was. Then one afternoon, Grayson heard something that stopped him cold. Laughter. Real laughter. Not polite or nervous or forced, but pure, unrestrained, belly-deep laughter coming from the twins' playroom. He followed the sound, white cane tapping unnecessarily against the floor. Found the doorway, stopped. Inside, Amara was on the floor building a block tower with Caleb and Rowan. The boys were giggling as they raced to add pieces. Amara was laughing too, celebrating their creativity, letting them knock things down and rebuild without criticism. The house hadn't heard laughter like that since Ilara died. And standing there, pretending not to see the joy he could hear so clearly, Grayson realized something terrifying. He was falling in love with a woman he was lying to, and his sons already loved her completely. The mansion changed, in ways Grayson couldn't fake not noticing. Warmth returned to rooms that had been cold for years. Not temperature warmth. The thermostat had always been set perfectly, but the kind of warmth that comes from presence, from life being lived instead of endured. The twins' laughter became a regular sound. Morning routines lost their dread. Bedtimes stopped being battles. Caleb and Rowan started sleeping through the night. Their small bodies finally relaxed enough to trust that morning would come, and the person they loved would still be there. Grayson would stand outside their bedroom door some nights, listening to the silence, the peaceful kind, the kind that meant rest instead of fear. The house felt alive again, like something that had been holding its breath for 3 years finally exhaled. And Grayson, trapped in his own deception, could only listen to the transformation happening around him. The twins changed most of all. Rowan, who used to hide behind furniture when adults entered the room, started running to Amara the moment she arrived each morning. He'd wrap his arms around her legs and say, "You came back." Every single day. "You came back." Like he still couldn't quite believe it. Caleb, who'd learned to play silently to avoid bothering anyone, started narrating his entire day. "Miss Amara, look what I built. Miss Amara, can we read this book? Miss Amara, why is the sky blue?" Questions poured out of him like he'd been saving them for someone who would actually answer. They trusted her in ways they'd never trusted the nannies. When they fell, they ran to her. When they were scared, they called for her. When they accomplished something small, finished their vegetables, used the bathroom by themselves, shared a toy, they looked to her for approval. And she gave it, every time, with words and smiles and celebration that felt genuine because it was. "I'm so proud of you. You're doing such a good job. God made you so special." They clung to her, literally, held her hand everywhere they went, sat pressed against her sides during story time, reached for her in their sleep when nightmares came. What would you do if you watched your children finally heal and knew you'd lied to the person making it happen. 2 weeks into the test, Grayson's guilt had become a physical weight. It sat on his chest when he woke up, followed him through the day, kept him awake at night. He justified the deception as protection, as wisdom, as a father doing what needed to be done to keep his sons safe from another abandonment. But watching Amara love them, really love them, not perform love or tolerate them for a paycheck, was making him question everything. One evening, after the twins were in bed, Grayson sat in his study with the door cracked open. He heard Amara's footsteps in the hallway, heard her pause outside the twins' room. Then he heard her voice, soft and private, praying. He should have announced himself, should have made noise so she'd know he was nearby. But he didn't. He sat there, frozen, and listened. God, I don't know what I'm doing. Her voice was quiet, honest, raw in a way she never was around people. These boys have been through so much. They've lost their mother. They've been passed between strangers. They've learned not to trust that people stay. Grayson heard her voice catch. I don't want to fail them. I don't want to be another person who leaves. But I'm scared I'm not enough. I'm scared I'll mess this up. These children already lost too much. She paused. Grayson could hear her breathing. I'm not asking you for anything for myself. I'm not asking for Grayson to love me or for this to turn into something permanent. I'm asking you to give me wisdom. Give me patience. Help me love these boys the way you love them. Let me be steady for them. Let me be safe. Another pause. And God, please heal Grayson's heart. I see how hard this is for him, how scared he is, how much he's carrying. I don't know how to help him, but you do. Be close to him. Remind him that you see him even when he can't see. Then she whispered, Amen, and her footsteps moved down the hallway toward her room. Grayson sat in the darkness of his study, dark glasses still on even though no one was there to see him, and felt something inside him shatter. That prayer broke me, because she wasn't performing, wasn't praying loud enough for him to overhear on purpose, wasn't asking God for wealth or status or security. She was asking for strength to love children who weren't hers, asking to be enough for people who'd already suffered too much. And she'd prayed for him, for his heart, for his healing, while he was lying to her. Grayson pulled the dark glasses off his face and pressed his palms against his eyes. God tests hearts, not people. The thought arrived fully formed, like something whispered from outside himself. God tests hearts. But Grayson had been testing Amara like she was on trial, like she was guilty until proven innocent, like his pain gave him permission to manipulate someone else's truth. What gave him the right? Money? Loss? Fear? None of those things justified what he was doing. He knew that now, had maybe known it from the beginning, but had been too afraid to admit it. Amara had passed every test, had shown up every day with kindness and patience and faith that didn't require an audience. She'd loved his sons not because they came with a mansion and a trust fund, but because they were children who needed love. And she'd done it all thinking he was powerless, thinking she'd gain nothing, thinking this was just what love looked like. Meanwhile, Grayson had been sitting in the shadows, cataloging her every move like some kind of moral detective, pretending his deception was justified by his past. This was supposed to reveal her. Instead, it was exposing me, exposing my brokenness, my mistrust, my unwillingness to take the risk that real love requires. I'd been testing her worthiness while proving my own unworthiness. He should end it, should walk into her room right now, confess everything, and beg for forgiveness he probably didn't deserve. But what if she left? What if the truth made her look at him with disgust instead of compassion? What if she decided a man who would deceive her like this wasn't someone she could trust? What if she walked away and took all the light she'd brought back into this house with her. Worse, what if she left and his sons, who were finally healing, shattered all over again? Grayson stood up, paced to the length of his study, put the glasses back on, then took them off again. Fear of losing her warred with fear of losing respect. Fear of the truth warred with fear of continuing the lie. But underneath all of it was something deeper. He felt unworthy. Unworthy of her faith. Unworthy of her kindness. Unworthy of the way she prayed for his healing while he manipulated hers. How do you confess to someone that you've been lying to test them when the test only revealed how broken you are? That night, Grayson couldn't sleep. He lay in bed turning the same questions over and over. Do I tell her now? Do I wait? Do I keep pretending and hope the guilt eventually fades? Around 2 a.m, he got up, walked to his dresser in the dark, real dark, not performed dark, and picked up the glasses. He held them in his hands, feeling their weight. These glasses represented everything: the test, the deception, the fear that had been controlling him since Ilara died, the walls he'd built around his heart that had ended up isolating him from his own children. If he told Amara the truth, those walls would have to come down. If he told her the truth, he'd have to trust her response. Trust that grace was real. Trust that love didn't always leave. His hand moved toward the trash can, then stopped. Because what if he was wrong? What if 14 failed caretakers and 3 years of watching his sons suffer had taught him a true lesson about human nature? What if Amara's kindness was real, but her staying power wasn't? What if removing the glasses meant removing the only protection his family had left? Grayson stood there frozen, hand hovering over the trash can, glasses dangling from his fingers. Behind him, through the walls, he could hear the house breathing. His sons sleeping peacefully for the first time in their lives. Amara resting in the guest room, probably dreaming about nothing more complicated than tomorrow's breakfast. And Grayson, standing in the dark with a pair of fake glasses in his hand, realized he'd created a test he didn't know how to end. He reached for the glasses one more time, fingers trembling, then stopped. The decision came 3 days later, not from courage, but from conscience. Grayson woke up to the sound of Caleb laughing in the kitchen, heard Amara singing while making breakfast, heard Rowan asking if they could go to the park later, his voice full of hope instead of hesitation, and he realized that every moment he waited was another moment he stole from all of them. Another moment built on a foundation that wasn't real. You can't build a life on a lie, no matter how good your reasons are. He found Amara in the garden that afternoon. The twins were napping, and she was sitting on the stone bench near Alara's rose bushes, reading her Bible in the sunlight. Grayson approached slowly, white cane tapping against the path. One last performance before the truth. Amara? She looked up, smiling. Hey, do you need something? He sat down beside her, felt the warmth of the sun on his face, heard birds singing nearby. Noticed everything because in a few minutes, everything might change. I need to tell you something. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. And I need you to let me finish before you respond. Her smile faded. Okay. Grayson reached up and slowly removed the dark glasses. Then he looked directly at her, made eye contact for the first time in weeks, saw her confusion shift to shock as understanding started to dawn. I can see, he said quietly. I've always been able to see. The blindness was never real. The silence that followed felt like it lasted hours. Amara stared at him. Her Bible slipped from her lap onto the bench. Her face went through a dozen emotions: confusion, disbelief, hurt, betrayal, before finally settling on something that looked like grief. You've been pretending? Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes. This whole time? Yes. She stood up, took a step back. Why? Here's where the truth got ugly, where justifications dissolved and all that remained was the raw admission of what he'd done. Because I was scared, Grayson said. Scared you were like the others. Scared you'd hurt my sons. Scared to trust that someone could love us without wanting something in return. So I tested you. I pretended to be blind so I could see who you really were when you thought I was powerless. Amara's hand moved to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. You tested me? I did. Her voice broke. While I was falling in love with your children? While I was praying for your healing? While I was trying to be steady for all of you? Grayson stood up, instinct making him reach for her, but she stepped back again. Don't. That single word carried more pain than any paragraph could. Grace doesn't mean pretending pain didn't happen. And Amara wasn't pretending. She was hurt. Deeply. And she had every right to be. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now, Grayson said, his voice cracking. I'm not even sure you should. What I did was wrong, manipulative, cruel, even if I told myself it was protection. You deserved honesty, and I gave you deception. You deserved trust, and I gave you a test. Tears were sliding down her face now. She pressed her hand to her chest. I thought we were building something real. We were. You were. I was the one who made it false. Those prayers I prayed, those moments with your sons, that was real, Grayson. That was me loving people I thought needed me. And the whole time you were watching like I was some kind of experiment. The accuracy of that statement cut him open, because that's exactly what he'd done. Turned love into data, turned faith into evidence, turned a human being into a hypothesis. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Amara wrapped her arms around herself, looked toward the house where the twins were sleeping. Do they know? No. She nodded slowly, started walking toward the house. Amara, please. She turned back, and the look on her face stopped him cold. Not anger, not hatred, just deep, aching disappointment. I need time, she said. I need to think. Then she walked inside, leaving Grayson standing alone in the garden where his late wife's roses still bloomed. He didn't know how long he stood there. Long enough for the sun to shift. Long enough for guilt to settle into every corner of his body. When he finally went back inside, he heard voices from the twins' playroom. Caleb and Rowan were awake, and they were with Amara. Grayson approached the doorway quietly, some old habit from his fake blindness making him pause and listen before entering. Is Miss Amara leaving? Rowan's voice was small, scared. Grayson's chest constricted. How did he know? I don't know yet, sweetie, Amara said softly. Her voice was thick, like she'd been crying. Please don't leave. Caleb's voice broke. Please, we'll be good. We promise we'll be good. Oh, God, they thought this was their fault. Grayson stepped into the doorway just as Amara pulled both boys into her arms. Listen to me, she said firmly, cupping their faces. If I leave, it has nothing to do with you. You two are perfect. You're kind and brave and so loved. Do you hear me? Nothing you did caused this. Then why? Rowan asked. Amara's eyes met Grayson's across the room. The twins followed her gaze and saw their father standing there, without the glasses, without the cane, looking directly at them. Caleb's eyes went wide. Daddy! Hi, buddy. You can see? I can see. Rowan looked between his father and Amara, trying to piece together what was happening. Then he did something that broke Grayson completely. He ran to Amara, wrapped his arms around her leg, held on tight. Caleb followed, both boys clinging to her, choosing her, even in their confusion. Their choice spoke louder than any words could. Because children know. They know who's safe, who's real, who loves them not because it's easy, but because it's right. And his sons had chosen the woman he'd tested, the woman he'd lied to, the woman who'd loved them faithfully while he'd loved them fearfully. "Boys," Grayson said, his voice breaking, "can you go play in your room for a few minutes? Miss Amara and I need to talk." They hesitated, looked up at Amara for permission. She nodded gently. "It's okay. I'm not going anywhere right now." Right now, not forever, just right now. When the twins left, Grayson moved closer to Amara. Not too close, just close enough. "I'm not apologizing as a billionaire," he said. "I'm not using money or power or position to make this right. I'm apologizing as a man, as a father, as someone who let fear turn him into someone he's ashamed of." Amara looked at him, waiting. "You gave us everything," Grayson continued. "You loved my sons when you gained nothing. You prayed for my healing while I was deceiving you. You showed me what faith looks like in action instead of words. And I repaid that by testing whether you were real." He took a shaky breath. "But here's what I learned. The test didn't reveal your character. It revealed mine. It showed me that I'd let grief and fear turn me into someone who'd rather manipulate truth than risk trusting it. Someone who'd forgotten that love requires vulnerability, not control." Tears were running down his face now. "You restored faith in this house, not through sermons or performances, but through showing up, through choosing my sons when you didn't have to, through being steady when steady was the rarest gift we could receive." Amara wiped her own tears. "I'm still hurt, Grayson." "I know. I don't know if I can trust you. I know. But I love those boys, and they need stability, not another person leaving." Grayson nodded. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve your presence, but they deserve yours. So whatever you decide about me, please don't let my failure take you away from them." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "God removed your sight so you could finally see." Grayson let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, because she was right. Pretending to be blind had taught him how to see people's hearts, had taught him to listen instead of assume, had taught him that real love shows up in small, daily moments when no one important is watching, except someone is always watching, and someone had used his deception to teach him truth. They didn't fix everything that day. Grace doesn't work that way. But Amara stayed, made dinner with the twins, put them to bed, prayed with them like she always did. And late that night, Grayson found her sitting in the garden again. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying." "I'm not staying for you," she said. "Not yet. I know. I'm staying for them. And because I believe God isn't finished with this story." Grayson sat beside her, leaving space between them. "Can I pray? Out loud? With you?" She nodded. So Grayson prayed, not the polished prayers he'd prayed in church, but honest ones, broken ones, prayers that admitted failure and asked for mercy, prayers that thanked God for removing his sight so he could finally see what mattered. When he finished, Amara added quietly, "And God, help us build something real this time." Amen. 6 months later, the mansion was full of sound, laughter, conversation, the twins' running footsteps, Amara's voice calling them to dinner, and Grayson, no longer pretending, no longer testing, learning what it meant to love without controlling the outcome. The transformation hadn't been instant. Trust rebuilt slowly. Forgiveness came in layers, but it came. Because sometimes God answers grief not with miracles, but with guardians, not with easy fixes, but with people willing to stay. And sometimes love only proves itself real when tested with nothing. So let me ask you, if love were tested when you had nothing, would it pass? Because that's not really a question about love. It's a question about faith.